I want to read you something from this book, Without Sanctuary. Some of the believers went to get it, but it's all sold out. And they said, what's going on? Is there a professor teaching a class? Listen, I'm going to read something. The story of a lynching, then, is more than the simple fact of a black man or woman hanged by the neck. It is the story of slow, methodical, sadistic, and often highly invented forms of torture and mutilation. If executed by fire, it is the red-hot poker applied to the eyes and genitals, and the stench of burning flesh as the body slowly roasts over the flames and the blood sizzles in the heat. If executed by hanging, it is the convulsive movement of the limbs, whether by fire or by rope. It is the dismemberment and distribution of severed bodily parts as favors and souvenirs to participants in the crowd. They used to come from miles around to see the hanging of a nigger. They would bring their children, and the children would watch, and the parents indeed, as we screamed and begged for mercy. Look at this now. Teeth, ears, toes, fingers, nails, kneecaps, bits of charred skin and bones. Such human trophies might reappear as watch fobs hanging on a watch chain, or be displayed conspicuously for public viewing. The severed knuckles of Sam Hose, for example, would be prominently displayed in the window of a grocery store in Atlanta. The brutalities meted out in these years often exceeded the most vivid of imaginations. Now I'm going to read you something that I couldn't finish. When I first read it, I just couldn't go no further. Listen to this. After learning of the lynching of her husband, Mary Turner, in her 8th month of pregnancy, vowed to find those responsible, swear out warrants against them, and have them punished in the courts. For making such a threat, a mob of several hundred men and women determined to teach her a lesson. After tying her ankles together, they hung her from a tree, head downward, which meant that her dress came down over her head. Dousing her clothes with gasoline, they burned them from her body while she was still alive. Someone used a knife ordinarily reserved for splitting hogs to cut open the woman's abdomen. The infant fell from her womb to the ground and cried briefly, whereupon a member of this Valdosta, Georgia mob crushed the baby's head beneath his heel. Hundreds of bullets were fired into Mary Turner's body, completing the work of the mob. The Associated Press, in its notice of the affair, observed that Mary Turner had made unwise remarks. See? Like the remarks that I'm making to you today. They're considered unwise. Because even though I have the right to speak, I have to pay a price for so doing. One more. After making unwise remarks about the execution of her husband, and the people in their indignant mood took exception to her remarks, as well as her attitude. Apprehended for allegedly killing his white employer, Luther Holbert, and his wife found themselves subjected to mob justice in Doddsville, Mississippi in 1904. Some 1,000 people stood and watched as the self-appointed executioners went about their business, engaging in the increasingly familiar ritual of torture, mutilation, and murder. A reporter for the Vicksburg Evening Post described the execution of the Holberts. This is something that's printed in white newspapers. When the two Negroes were captured, they were tied to trees. And while the funeral pyres were being prepared, they were forced to suffer the most fiendish tortures. The blacks were told to hold out their hands while one finger at a time was chopped off. The fingers were distributed as souvenirs. The ears of the murderers were cut off. Holbert was beaten severely. His skull was fractured and one of his eyes knocked out with a stick hung by a shred from the socket. The most excruciating form of punishment consisted in the use of a large corkscrew in the hands of some of the mob. This instrument was bored into the flesh of the man and woman in their arms, legs, and body, then pulled out. The spirals tearing out big pieces of raw, quivering flesh every time it was withdrawn. Holbert and his employer had quarreled before the murder, but there was no evidence to implicate Holbert's wife. Two blacks mistaken for Luther Holbert had already been slain by a posse. I could go on, but I want you to get the book. And if you get the book, Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, and you see what those who claim to be our friends have done, we have to talk to them about this. And we must not be cowardly in so doing. I'm going to close this now.